Ink up, slow down, write your rhythm with script and scribe. Hi everyone, today I'm going to go through my favorite Wearingeul inks and swatch them side by side on two different notebooks. So I'll be using the official Wearingeul swatchbook and comparing Muji High Quality notepad. Wearingeul is one of those brands I keep coming back to, not just because of the colors, but because each ink has a bit more intentionality to the design. Now, some of you may know that I also have a booktube channel, and I think that's part of why this brand appeals to me. Starting with a star spattered hill, this one is inspired by a poem by Yoon Dong-ju and is surprisingly legible for yellow gold. And I do have to say, I always get it mixed up. I keep saying star splattered, but it doesn't matter. It's still a beautiful ink. Look at that effect in there. Yeah, gorgeous. Straight away, you can see that rich amber base and the gold shimmer is quite fine. So it doesn't overwhelm the ink, and you'll see that in the swatches. What I like here is the balance. You still get shading, the slightly mustard tones in the lighter areas, but it keeps enough definition to stay readable. It actually holds together better than I expected for this kind of color. That said, it's not the most well-behaved ink on every paper. So you do sometimes get bleed through and feathering. On these two, though, it's been much more controlled and, yeah, just really usable. This is one I don't reach for often, but every time I do, I end up liking it more than I expect to, and I love the way it looks in the barrel of a demonstrator. It's really visually stunning. Now, because I was very generous with these swatches, I had to wait a long time for them to dry, and in fact, it took a very long time. Only the one on the Muji is totally dry, and you can see 3 sections in there from where I put the dots. So the glitter has sort of pooled in those sections, and then the one on the Wearingeul is a little bit more balanced in terms of the distribution. But it took me, doing all of the samples or all of the swatches, and I waited an extra 5 minutes. So yeah, I was way too generous with the ink. And next we have this Beneath the Wheel, which is a deep ivy color, and it's gorgeous. It is not supposed to sheen or shimmer anything, just to shade because it's a standard ink, but I do think I have had some sheen in it. We'll see. Anyway, I have gone down to just 2 dots because obviously the 3 dots was way too much on the previous swatches. So yeah. This is what it looks like as it's drying. We start off with the Muji, and you can see that it's, taking a while to dry, but it's not overly wet. I'll just go upwards and we can see the lovely shading in there. Now going on to the Wearingeul swatchbook, I was surprised by how dark it is. It's almost leaning towards darkest green, heading towards black. And fast forward to the dry swatches, it most definitely has sheen, and it's a really gorgeous sheen. So you see the shading and sheen in there. I haven't really had that effect in my writing because I use extra fine and fine nibs with that ink. And here you can see that it's not all black any longer. So we do have some green, but it's interesting that all the sheening went around the edges, and then you've got the green in the center. Next, we move on to Jane Eyre, and this is a soft grey-leaning violet, somewhere between a dusty lavender and a mauve, and I do love this. It is a fairly dry ink, but it has lovely shading. So we'll see that in the actual swatches, and you'll also see when I write out the actual name of it, that in the writing, this pen is highly legible as well. Because initially when I got it, I wasn't sure. It looked really watery. In fact, it takes ages to get the ink to settle onto my dip pen. And then the drops are a lot smaller than the other 2 inks because this is less saturated. And I didn't think of that. So I was like, I'll do 2 drops again. And yeah, I was just surprised at how difficult that was. But it did eventually happen, thank goodness. And then I got on with actually doing the swatch. I had remembered that this is actually a fast drying ink. So you'll see that the dots that I had on the page were already starting to dry in place. And so they've left their mark. For me, this sort of muted color is the perfect matchup for Jane Eyre. It feels elegant, it feels subdued and moody, and it reminds me of Heathers and English countryside. So, yeah, I think that they did a great job with teaming this up with Jane Eyre. The Muji does a great job of bringing out the different tones of this ink. So we've probably got about 5 in there, going from the lightest to the darkest mauve. But if we go on to the Wearingeul, we sort of see 3. You got the lightest at the top left, then you got the middle section, and then bottom right edges, and right at the bottom, all the darkest mauve. So those are my first 3. Do let me know in the comments which ones you like and whether any of these are actually your favorites. Number 2 and 3, the green and the violet, are my absolute favorite, and a star splattered hill won me over. I got it just to break out of my routine of getting subdued, muted colors, and then I've actually used it a lot more than I thought I would. Next up is Wicked Witch, inspired by the wonderful Wizard of Oz, and it is a lovely dark navy that works as an everyday writer. So I like to journal with this with an extra fine or fine nib, but in broader nibs, you start to see even more character. There's a subtle coppery sheen that comes through. I have this as part of the set with the shimmer potions, so you can actually modify the base ink, this particular one, into a few different variations, which makes it quite versatile. So for example, when I add the red shimmer, which is called Flame, into the navy, it is called Wicked Witch of the South. And I really enjoy that. And they give you the whole guideline on how to do this. It is 10 mils of the standard ink to 1 mil of the glitter potion. But even without all the potions, I really like Wicked Witch on its own. Now this blue-black ink, this navy ink, is so saturated. It is almost opposite experience to what we just had with Jane Eyre. We'll have a look at the swatches as they're drying, and then we'll fast forward to the dry ones. Now here you can already start to see the sheening develop on the Muji. Less so when I've got the camera right up looking down, but at the angle you saw it. And also on the Wearingeul, I'm seeing it on the edges if I get the light right. Ta-da! Sheen galore, and this is the Muji, and it looks gorgeous. So you know that in a stub, when you get that effect, it just looks really good. But if we have a look at the Wearingeul, do we get the same thing? Yes, we do. It does look a little bit like the sheen was moving towards the edges, but it's not too bad. It's fairly balanced. Yeah, great effect. This next one reminds me a little bit of Diamine Writer's Blood, though it's slightly less wet, I'd say. Metamorphosis is this deep burgundy with a copper sheen, inspired by Kafka's writing. It has that classic, slightly vintage red tone you often see in traditional fountain pen colors, and the fountain pens that are more modern that, you know, have a vintage vibe like a Pilot E95S or a Mont Blanc Meisterstück in burgundy. When it comes to red ink, I find myself gravitating towards burgundy rather than something bright like Diamine Wild Strawberry or Waterman Audacious Red. It's really these colors that are almost leaning towards a brown that have my heart. So yeah, this Metamorphosis is fabulous. We're going to wait for it to actually dry because right now you can't see any of the sheening effect, but there will be sheening, there will be shading, and we'll see that in the dried swatch. So on the Muji, we've got the shading happening on the right of the swatch, and on the left, all of the coppery toned sheen has sort of pooled. But yeah, this is what you can expect with the ink. Dark burgundy and copper together. One of my favorite colors in general is grey, and of those, this is one of the top ones, Tin Woodman, and it is really unassuming and subtle, but such a great alternative to a black ink for journaling, especially with my fine or extra fine nibs. And I like that it is dry leaning because then I don't have to worry as I'm journaling waiting for ink to actually dry. Now we just get the swatches down really quickly. and then we can have a look at them as they're drying, and then we'll skip forward to the dried overall swatch. And as it's drying, you start to see hints of that shading effect that it has. And in the dry swatch, you see the shading come into effect. You even see it in the writing. So underneath, I've written Tin Man. I should have written Tin Woodman, but you can see a bit of shading, and that's quite a thin line from the dip pen. Now, again, you see it in the Wearingeul swatchbook. And at this point, I can see this is a really useful exercise because I am missing having chroma shading inks, and Wearingeul is doing more and more of those. So if you've got a good recommendation, do let me know. The next ink is a Taxidermied Genius, and the inspiration is a little bit unsettling and talks about the fragmentation of our being, or of the being of a particular genius that's in the poem by Yisang. And I think this is a good representation because the base color is joined by also having a sheen that is opposite of the base, and then you've also got shading. So there's some fragmentation going on there. Now the base is a sort of plum color, and here with the bottle, you'll see the sheen on the rim. So it's going to be green, and that's sort of like the opposite of the base. And we're not seeing it in the wet swatches, but seeing the shading. So that was the Muji, and this is the Wearingeul. Again, you only see the shading and not the shimmer. But we're going to skip ahead to the dried ones. And ta-da, we got the green, and it almost looks 3D in certain, at a certain angle. It seems to like stand out. Less so in the Wearingeul, which is strange to me because, I mean, they created it. But yeah, on the swatchbook, you don't see it as much as on the Muji. It looks a lot darker. Then ink number 8 is 13 Children, which has another really melancholy sort of inspiration to it, but it is a gorgeous ink, as all the other ones have been. And you can see that as we look at it in the bottle, it has got a lot of complexity to it. I think of this as being a darker teal to the teals that I already have. It's a sort of petrol blue leaning teal. And once again, as we zoom into the rim of this bottle, you can see hints of what the sheen is going to look like. And then we have a look at it on the page with the Muji. When it's wet, the sheen isn't very clear yet. We can't see it developed yet, but we can see the shading. And on the Wearingeul, same story. Again, we can see shading, and there seems to be hints of shimmer developing on the edges. And fast forward. There we go. Gorgeous, gorgeous shimmer. I say shimmer, I mean sheen. I think I'm tired. So this is definitely sheen, and it looks lovely with the shading as well. Less so on the Wearingeul again. So yeah, the Muji is really helping the inks to shine, I would say. And our final ink is actually going to be a grey. Again, another grey, but it has got complexity to it. I think I've used that word before. It is shimmery. And this time I do mean shimmer rather than sheen. You saw the glitter at the bottom. It has got swathes. It's got loads. They haven't skimped on this. So it has a wonderful effect. It is a cool grey rather than a neutral one. It has blue undertones, and you can see that already as we look at it here, give it a good shake. And once we lay it down, it will be a lot clearer why this is in my top 9 favorites. It is Shoot the Moon. And I'm glad we have the other grey on top of it, Tin Man or Tin Woodman, because it will let us contrast them. And with it being wet, it sort of looks same with the other one. But once it dries and you compare it, we'll see the difference. While it's in the midway stages of drying, it doesn't look like anything special. See, here on the Muji, it just looks like a really dark grey. And again, here on Wearingeul, neither of them is showing a shimmer, but ta-da! Shimmer galore and hugely different from the other grey. it is definitely much cooler and yeah, just sparkly and lovely. So it looks great in a stub nib or with a stub nib. And it's looking less so on Wearingeul, but you can still see the shimmer and the shading as well. So this is one of my top greys